Welcome to Jim Harold's Campfire Deep Dive Live. And today we are going to talk with an experiencer who encountered possibly a real live Banshee. Hi, I'm Jim Harold, and today we are going to take a classic campfire story from our Jim Harold's Campfire podcast and share it with you and bring on the experiencer, take a deep dive, and take your questions. And I'd like to welcome Lucy to the show from the UK. Lucy, thank you so much for taking time to share this story again with us today.
You're very welcome, Jim. I'm delighted to be invited back on the show.
Well, I've got to say, this is a very personal story and a very sensitive story. So I really just want to say at the outset how much I appreciate that you want to share it with us again and maybe answer some questions from the audience. So I will just say this, the floor is yours, and please tell us what happened.
Thank you, Jim. It was August 2003, and I was just leaving London with my father, who'd come to pick me up in his enormous Jeep with a trailer on the back. I'd been living in London for a couple of years, so I'd had to stuff the trailer full of all sorts of things. And my word, there was some stuff on that trailer. So we travelled back off the motorway to my home near Birmingham, which is in the Midlands, and we were on the motorway. And as we were driving along, it was a lovely hot day, and we were in the slow lane because we had a big trailer behind us. And as we drove along, in the fast lane, which is 2 lanes over, a very strangely glittery car pulled up, and it was going very slowly in the fast lane to be pulling up level parallel with us. And as I looked over, I could see the lady in the passenger side start to look over at us. And she had a round face, and it was kind of very pale, very grey pale. And she had curly reddish hair, quite straggly. I couldn't see who was driving. I think it was a man. I wasn't sure. And she stared out of her window at us. She was really staring at us. And I looked over at my dad who was driving and said, do, do you know her? And he said, well, do you? I said, well, I don't know who that is. Anyway, so she thought she was going very, very slowly. And I got this really heavy, funny sense. I wasn't quite sure why we were being stared at. Decided we would go and have a look at the trailer. Maybe something was flapping in the trailer or something was about to come off.
So we had a little drop out there, but essentially what happened was you saw this strange woman kind of sound like she was kind of looking at you like this. Now, when we talked on the show, you mentioned that she had, was it bright red hair? Was that right?
Yeah, it was a straggly kind of red, long, lank hair that was, it was red, but kind of looked greasy. It just looked straggly. Yeah.
And
A very pale face.
You mentioned also the car, the quality of the car. It seemed kind of off, didn't it?
Really odd. I'd never seen another color like it. It was a darkish green, but it was the most glittery, sparkly car I've ever seen. And it was a hot day, but it had an ethereal quality about it. It was a really sparkly car, and the mixture of the sparkly green and the red hair just made me think Celtic or something like that.
So you and your dad see this strange woman. She's looking at you almost mouth agape, kind of odd looking person, odd looking car. Just what in the world's going on? So your thought goes to maybe there's something wrong in the back. Maybe something's not secured. What happens from there?
We stopped off on the hard shoulder of the motorway and got out of the car, went to go and check the trailer, and everything was secure. Absolutely everything was secure. There was maybe a bit of fabric or something, but nothing serious. So we took that back in. I went to go and get into the car on the passenger side. My father went to go and get into the car on the driver's side, and at that point, he was hit by a large lorry truck, and he was catapulted down the motorway quite a few yards, and he died pretty instantly. It was really traumatic. And at that point, up until that point, my memory is absolutely clear as a bell. I know exactly what happened. after that point, time went like toffee. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know how much time had gone by. Obviously, hours had, but suddenly my mum was there to come and pick me up. It was weird. It was really weird. Anyway, my brother was in Australia at the time, and we couldn't find him. We couldn't get in contact with him because of his phone. So we spent some time trying to get in contact with him to take him back up, to take him, back to England to come to the funeral. And eventually we got him home, and I picked him up from Heathrow Airport, and we began the very long trek back up to my dad's house, which was in Carlisle, which is Cumbria, which is right by the Scottish border, where all of my family are from, all the Armstrongs. So we got up there, and it was an absolutely burning hot day. And my father had bought a house there that my brother had never seen because he'd been in Australia for a couple of years. And he decorated one of the rooms for my brother, put all his rugby trophies up it. He was really keen that my brother would come home one day and spend time there. And Tom had never seen the house, and so I opened up the front door and I just let him go in, just let him go and explore. And I followed him down the long hallway to the kitchen at the very end, and he was just looking around. And as I felt really sad, but happy that he was in the house. And as I turned round to look behind me towards the door to think about bringing some of the things into the car, I saw my dad at the bottom of the stairs, and he was he was absolutely brimming with joy. He was absolutely overjoyed that his lad was there and was finally seeing him. And he used to have this funny tic where he'd put his hand up to his mouth and talk and do this sometimes. It's just a funny tic that he had. And he was doing that, but I could hear him. He had this very funny kind of like little giggle that he'd do sometimes. Sounds really weird. But it was absolutely clear in my head. It was a very clear mental picture, although I knew that he wasn't actually there. I turned back to look at Tom, and then turned back to look again, and he was gone. And that was it.
Wow. And if I remember correctly from the original story, you talked to a family friend or a physician in someone, and they had some
Yeah.
speculation about this possible banshee.
Well, I was really, really struck by the nature of this woman in the car, and I could not, for the life of me, work out what her role was in it. It just seemed that it was almost kind of like she was foretelling something, because she was the actual reason that we stopped the car. It wasn't, and there wasn't any other reason that we'd have bothered to stop the car. So I asked a chap that I knew who was interested in the paranormal. He was actually a medical doctor, but he was also interested in near death experiences. And I said to him, what do you think this experience is? And he was pretty sure it's some kind of crisis trauma. It was some reason that I'd conjured up to explain the extreme stress that I went through, because it was such a horrible event. And these accidents are always completely, they don't have any cause or rhyme, do they? They just come out of nowhere and shock you to your core. And so I think that he thought that the reason I was imagining this woman was because I was trying to create a narrative around it to understand it better. But the fact was that she was the actual reason we stopped, and she gave me such a chill when I saw her. She was very odd. And one thing I didn't say on the podcast that I really wanted to get across, and I'm sorry I'd forgotten afterwards, so it's really good that I got this opportunity to do so, was that I don't know about your other experiences, and I suspect this is the case for them, but when you've experienced something really paranormal or inexplicable, there is a there's a sense of dread. There's a real sense of fear that you can't shake. If you hear a bump in the night and you think, oh, eventually you think maybe it was rats, maybe it was, something
Right.
falling over downstairs or whatever. You can eventually explain it away and forget it. These things you don't forget. They're absolutely imprinted, and you know that there was something strange about it, something odd.
Now, I think I asked you this
Yeah.
on the audio show on the podcast, but did you think this was definitely more a harbinger, or it was something that trying to ensnare your father? In other words, was it trying to lure him to his death, or was it just maybe aware and kind of foretelling his death?
I remember you posing that, and that really made me think. It was a really interesting proposition, because I didn't get the sense that it was evil or trying to lure anybody, but I did get the sense that it was observing, and it was aware that something massive was about to happen. It was almost just, in passing, saying, I can see it, or I know that something massive is about to happen. We had absolutely no inkling whatsoever, obviously. So I don't think that we could have been giving out those vibes to anybody else,
Sure.
because we wouldn't stop. Otherwise, it just
Just
didn't make sense.
Now, going back to her facial expression, was it one of shock? Was it one of, I mean, if you can just describe that again, the Banshee's facial expression.
Sure. She had quite a round moon face, just naturally round, and her eyes were some kind of watery color. You couldn't really make them out very strongly, but her whole face just was very kind of grayish white, and with straggly hair as well. It was just the way she was staring at us like this, and it's one of those things. When somebody does stare at you, you immediately go like this. You think, is it me? Is it somebody else? But she was staring so strongly at us, and the sense I got was Celtic because of that red hair and the green car, and I just got the really weird sense. And I know that it communicated to my dad, because he turned to me and said, "Do you know her?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, no, of course not. Just some strange woman going by in the car." So we had absolutely no. There's no history of this in the family or anything like that. So I'm not quite sure what it means, but it did feel like it was prescient. It was foretelling something. It was trying to make us aware of its presence. I don't know, because people just don't stare at you on the motorway, I suppose, do
Right.
they?
No, not typically. Now, let me ask you this. Some people, if they would have had an experience like this, would want to have nothing to do with the paranormal. They wouldn't listen to any paranormal shows, nothing like that. They would get as far away as they could from it, which I would totally understand. It seems like you still have, obviously, an interest in this kind of material and this kind of subject. Why is that the case for you?
I think I've always been interested in it, and I have experienced other things before as well. It's why I said that when something truly odd happens, you know to your bones that you've experienced something weird. It can't be explained by you know wind in the pipes, or
Right.
kind of whatever it is. And I've had other experiences as well. Maybe one day I'll come back and tell you about an experience that I felt just last year. This time, in fact, almost exactly this time last year, when my husband's nan died, and I saw something weird then. But it, it's one of those things that I'm not even aware of until it's happened. So it's not
Right.
useful to me at all. It's just occasionally something really weird will happen, and I can't. Like I said, I can't make use of it. It doesn't help. It scares me, and then afterwards, I realise that it has been really weird. But I do genuinely love this kind of stuff, and I do feel that there's something very, very odd going on out there on the whole. And I always, I met with some friends of mine who were also interested in paranormal. I've got some really good friends who are interested in it, and they said, "Look, it's anomalous phenomena that you're looking at." And 99% of the time, it is just completely explainable by all sorts of means. It's that 1%
That's
of times that it
that's
gets.
what I feel. That's my feeling. But that's all it takes is the 1%.
Mhm.
Just 1/10 of percent would mean something.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So would you be willing to take some audience questions now?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Kim asks if the lady was in the passenger seat. I wonder who was driving the car, the green car. Did you get any look at who was driving the car, Lucy?
I just got the sense of a man. I could see a white hand on the gear stick, but I couldn't see. I couldn't see much past her, because she was, she turned her head and was staring out at us. So you couldn't see much past her really. But there was definitely somebody driving. I expect there must have been somebody driving, otherwise how'd you keep the car on the road?
Sure.
But no.
Rendezvous D says a similar thing happened to my aunt. She died in a heart attack a day after a neighbor came in and told my mom that she saw my aunt headless hours before she had an attack. My
Oh
goodness.
gosh, poor thing.
Judith says, and I agree, there's so much we still don't understand.
Yeah, Definitely.
Tanya, I believe Lucy said her father did see this woman, correct? You both saw it,
Absolutely.
and he asked you, do you know who that is? Because the
Yes.
thought was, this is somebody you know, and they're surprised to see you, maybe, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Kate says, also coming in late as a person of Irish descent, this story fascinates me, and it is fascinating.
Well, just to say to Kate, obviously that my family are kind of Scottish English on the borders, and there's less Banshee myth in there, but there are old stories of the chieftains of various tribes seeing strange washerwomen washing bloodstained clothes in streams before battles. That's the only
Wow.
thing that I've been able to, that's the only thing I've been able to ally it to. But of course, she wasn't doing any kind of washing.
Wow. Tanya says, such a tragic story. My condolences to you. And a lot of people have said that. V said, very sad. Shazzy said, my word, I'm so sorry for your loss. Kim said, I'm sorry. I've heard this story a couple times now, and it always gives me goosebumps. I'm sorry for your loss.
That's really kind.
Stara says, so sad. So I mean, a lot of people having a lot of feeling for your situation. Judith says, I have an Irish neighbor who saw a banshee. He said she sat by a stream combing her long hair.
The hair seems to be a real factor in a lot of these myths, doesn't it?
Yes. Now, I'm not sure. I wonder if the man driving the car knew she was there. Oh, that's an interesting theory. So I think what Shazzy is saying is this Banshee woman was the person driving the car. If she was some kind of supernatural being, was the driver of that green car even aware of her presence? Interesting.
That's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, it could be. It's really interesting. I've got to say that the experience, obviously for me, was really traumatic.
Of course.
And in the days after my dad's death, I had something approaching PTSD because I got the shakes out of nowhere, and I kept thinking about it. It was hard, but I also got the sense that there was how to describe it. There was something closing in. Every time I tried to sleep, I felt that something was closing in, and I felt like I was in a room of people, although obviously I wasn't. And it really scared me to go to sleep. I couldn't. I couldn't deal with that. So I found it very, very difficult. I had to take some sleeping tablets to get to sleep because, because it was it was just traumatic. But I think that I didn't even remember this story in the days immediately afterwards because my head was so full of what had happened.
Sure.
And afterwards as well, I thought that, because my dad had met such a tragic end, I thought if I ever saw him again, he'd be feeling tragic and sad and upset and angry or whatever this is. So when I saw him at the house and he was beaming with happiness, I couldn't understand it at first. I couldn't understand it because I just thought surely, after such an ending, you've got to, want to give us one last message, or there's got to be something you need to tell us, or whatever it is. But no, he was happy. He was really happy.
Well, that's the thing. Even though his death was tragic, the hope is, and based on what you said, the likelihood is he's in a better place and he's happy. Of course, the tragedy is still a tragedy regardless. But that is, I would think, that's a bit of a comfort. I mean, I've had my mom passed, but it wasn't, and it was quick. It was a heart attack. It was unexpected, but it wasn't traumatic in the sense of what happened to you. So I can't even imagine what that would be like to be there and experience it. So again, just so tough. Rendezvous says the lady could have seen something weird or different with your dad. Was she looking at you or your dad? So she was looking at you both, wasn't she?
She was, but I got the sense she was staring at me mainly, and that's why my dad turned to me and said, "Did you? Who was that?" And I said, "I didn't know." But yeah, she was staring at us collectively, but me mainly, I think.
Lonnie says, "Oh, I remember this story well. Very sorry for your loss, Lucy."
Thank you. Thank you.
Lycra wants to know, Lucy, have you had further communications from your dad? I assume after that one you told us about, have any other family members experienced anything? I guess that would be in addition to what you experienced with your brother when he came to visit.
Yeah, Tom didn't experience anything at all. He has had some weird experiences in the house because we kept the house that my dad had lived in. It's only just now gone on the market, actually. And he kept the house, and he's felt what he thought was a little girl in there. But actually, apart from that, none of my aunts or uncles, nobody else felt anything. And the only thing I could have said was that I felt that kind of sense of proximity of something getting too close to me, just in the days after the death. And it was about a week or so later that my brother finally got back from Australia, and that's when I saw Dad. So I don't know whether he chose that time to come through or what.
Yeah, because I know you had said how much your dad really wanted him to visit. That was a big
Yeah.
thing for him. So he got to see it. Unfortunately, it was after his passing. Jen wanted to know, did Lucy say how long she had been on the road before the green car caught up to them?
Do you know, we had not long stopped off at the service station at Oxford, which is probably about halfway, and we'd already stopped once. And obviously, on the way back to the car, we checked the trailer, and nothing had moved, nothing had changed. It was just my tap on it; nobody had wanted it. And so we hadn't long got back on the road again, probably about 10, 15 minutes before we pulled off again. So it wasn't like we'd been driving for hours. And obviously, distances in England are very much shorter than the kind that you're used to in America. And it was only about 2.5 hours all in. So we'd only been traveling for about an hour before we rested, and then back on the road again.
Marsha wanted to know if this was a Banshee and not a woman, what is the significance of the color of the car? And I don't know, she may just be posing as a rhetorical question, but that is a question. The fact that it was kind of almost glittering or sparkling, it sounded like. I mean, I
Yeah,
wonder.
I've never
I
seen
don't
another
know.
car like it. I've never seen another car like it. It was the most emerald of emerald greens I'd ever seen, and it absolutely shone in the sun. It was sparkly. And I think that you're absolutely right, Marsha. I think that there's no significance to the colour of the car until it's, I suppose, brought into conjunction with the lady with the kind of aubanish, curlyish hair, and just this whole strange atmosphere that surrounded the experience. That was what I suppose brings out the importance of the car, the colour of the car, because it just said in my mind, if you're looking at symbols, basic symbology and that kind of thing, it just said Celtic. But it was,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what kind of Celtic really. I mean, like I said, my family don't have any Irish connections. It's just Scottish. So perhaps it should have been a tartan car.
Jonathan said or asked, did you tell your family about the lady you saw before the accident? Well, I don't know if you would have had an opportunity to tell before. Oh, yeah, I see. Saw before the accident. I got it. I'm a little slow sometimes, Jonathan. I'm sorry. Did you tell your family about the lady you saw before the accident? And if you did, what did they say? Thank you for your question, Jonathan. Sorry that I can't read.
Thanks, Jonathan. I didn't really in the days immediately afterwards because it was just so massive. And I was so traumatized, and I was dealing. The trouble with the death, like that with any death, is that you're suddenly thrown into doing a lot of admin, which feels obscene almost at the time because you just cannot be dealing with the thing that's happened, let alone all of the administration and bureaucracy that goes with it. So and I had this kind of PTSD thing as well, where I was really shocked and shaky, and I couldn't go to sleep properly. So I was in a bit of a mess the first couple of days afterwards.
Sure.
And
Oh my gosh.
yeah, and I think that after that, I was talking. I did mention it. I did mention it to a couple of people. I mentioned it to my mum. I mentioned it to a couple of friends, and I think that they were all dealing themselves with dealing with me, having seen such a thing, having experienced such a thing, and that nobody had dealt with a sudden traumatic death like that before. And I think that everybody was treading on eggshells, and they almost kind of just humoured me and said, "Oh, really?" And just on the heads, and do you want something to drink? Do you want something to eat? And didn't really deal with And it wasn't until about a couple of years later that I started talking to some friends, sorry, hiccup, who were in the paranormal kind of field. And I just started, because I felt I was worried that people wouldn't take me seriously as well after that, because it had just been kind of brushed away a little bit up until that point. So it wasn't until a little while afterwards I actually started talking to people about it. And I still don't, I mean, this is the most public I've ever been with this story, um, because I know that it sounds really weird and it could just be a massive coincidence.
But it's,
No,
again, as I say a lot of times, too much of a coincidence to be a coincidence almost. The thing that gets me, it would have been one thing if you would have seen this and gotten into just a general accident and something horrible would have happened. But the fact that is almost what made you get out and check, which directly led to it. I think that's the thing that really is most chilling about this to me, is that it almost caused it. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, I know exactly what you mean, and that's why it made me think twice when you said, did the woman kind of lure us into it almost? But I looked at it more like one of the ancient, the ancient fates,
Yes.
the fates. Once your fate's told, you can't escape it, and you can see them, and they're literally, kind of pulling the threads or snipping them, and there is absolutely nothing you can do about it, whether they're there or not. They're just simply
Right.
they're simply there to announce it, not cause it, because those things are already in motion.
Right.
But yeah, it did mean that we stopped. What I just can't get past, but it did mean that we actually stopped, whereas we absolutely wouldn't have, because we hadn't long stopped at a service station, and there was no reason for us to stop otherwise.
We have another, here is a note from Tanya. She says, same here, Jim. My mom passed away suddenly from her heart, but I can't imagine losing her in such a tragic way. I'm sure this is why your dad wanted to make sure you saw him in a new, happy life and without pain.
That's really kind. Yeah, I like to think that. I think that he couldn't resist my brother coming to see the house and the two of us together, because we hadn't seen my brother in a couple of years. And I think that obviously that's kind of where he felt comfortable leaving it, because I haven't felt or seen anything since. Do you know, actually saying that, I had a dream some months after that. And I was in a house and my dad was outside looking in the window. And I kept telling him, come on inside, come on inside. And he didn't. And that, I think, was the final goodbye. I think that was the end part of it. I've never felt him since. Never worried about him since, if you like. Or often been sad to have lost him and missed him horribly, but I've not worried about where he is.
Weekly Creep says that in an earlier remark, Weekly Creep said something along the lines, they felt this was like a modern day folk tale, almost in the sense that it's very reminiscent of those. And says, we were always afraid of the Banshee when we were camping. We felt safe in Dublin, but not in the country.
Strange things
Uh,
happen.
Jen has a good question. Do you know anything about this section of the road? Have there been other strange occurrences on this stretch of road? Good question.
It is a good question, yes. And I Googled that part of the road. It was Junction 9 at Bicester, if anybody's interested in looking and can find anything, because I didn't, unfortunately. But I think that anywhere along a motorway may have had occurrences in the past. And I've certainly passed along that way since then and not seen anything, what you might see. But I couldn't pick up any instances of somebody having had a similar experience, or even any other kind of experience there, although I assume there must have been other traffic, accidents.
Marcia said maybe the colors were attention, since banshees are harbingers that warn you. So maybe that was to get um, your attention. Jonathan says he understands the answer to his question, and he's so sorry for your loss.
That's really
Rendezvous says, I don't know about you guys, but most of the villains I know, reality and fictitious, prefer green over the usual black. I'm sorry for your loss. Must have been a tough experience. And she also says nothing against folks who love green.
That's true, but I studied English at university, and green was a very dangerous colour in the medieval period. It was the colour of fairies, and it was the colour of death as well. It could be the colour of youth, but it was also colour of death as well, because you can imagine the putrefaction and rot and things like that. So it was there's an old story called Gawain and the Green Knight, where the Green Knight is, can have his head cut off and get up the next day and carry on, and it's all part of the story. So green is definitely kind of dangerous, magical, fairy, kind of death.
As we close out here, Lucy, do you have any final thoughts for us on this story? Any final reflections you'd like to share?
I'd like to say how grateful I am to be able to share it in a like-minded community and an open-minded community, because I never thought that it would necessarily be taken very seriously, and I'm grateful for that opportunity. So thank you to you and for your listeners for their very, very kind thoughts to me, their condolences. If anybody ever had anything at all, any other experiences at all like this, I know that sometimes your show will throw up those coincidences, and that's really why I came on, to see if there was anything out there in the multiverse that could possibly, be aligned to it. I'd be really grateful to hear it. It just said to me that the world is a lot odder, a lot stranger than can possibly be accounted for. Who knows what I experienced? It might well be completely explicable, but right now, as of this moment, it's a bit like trying to explain the internet to the Victorians. You just couldn't. So maybe there will be a natural explanation one day, but right now, I don't have it.
And Lonnie kind of ends it on a good note. He says, thanks so much for sharing this very personal story. God bless. Lucy, stay on the line. We'll talk after we're done here a moment, if you don't mind. But I want to thank you again for joining us today and sharing this very personal story.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And thank you for tuning in to Jim Harold's Campfire Deep Dive live. We do this live, and we're trying to do it every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. And we also have the archive of past episodes at youtube.com/Jim Harold. Make sure that if you enjoy what we're doing here, that you subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. And we really appreciate, particularly when someone shares such a personal story. And, you never know where the supernatural is going to touch your life. Sometimes it's frightening. Sometimes it's reassuring. It can be sweet. It can be not so sweet. But the truth is that I think it touches all of our lives in one way or another. I hope you'll check out my podcast, Jim Harold's Campfire. As I said before, please subscribe to this YouTube channel, because that's what we talk about. The strange, the unusual, the supernatural. We'll talk to you next time. As always, stay safe and stay spooky. Bye-bye, everybody.